another edition of the Austin Wellness Series, where I'm interviewing other practitioners in the Austin area here, just to really, the point is to introduce folks to the really vast amount of practitioners who are doing a lot of really great things in the Austin area. And today we have Tianna Roser, who has a really great combination of skills. She's a certified hypnotist and also a Reiki teacher, as well as a Reiki master. So she's teaching other folks how to do Reiki and also doing it on her patients and clients. So welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Chris. Glad to be here.
So I tend to like to jump into these conversations and get an understanding of how you came to be a practitioner and how you came to do what you do, because I find those stories to be really interesting. So how did you end up here?
Yeah, I find it interesting too. Particularly, I was just thinking about this last night as I was baking Christmas cookies, and I'm not somebody who even likes to really be in the kitchen. And I remember when I was little, and my family asked me what I want to be when I grow up, and I said a baker. And I laugh now because I don't like to cook or anything except for Christmas cookies. But I was thinking about how it wasn't like, oh, I want to be a hypnotist, or that's something probably any child has ever said.
I haven't heard it yet, but that'd be great if you do. Yeah.
Maybe one day, maybe they'll see this video and they'll be inspired.
We're inspiring the youth right now.
Yeah. So it's not something that conventionally people are raised to think about as a career path, and certainly wasn't anything that I knew about. So I went to school and studied marketing to be a businesswoman. I thought I was going to yeah, right. I mean, honestly, I didn't have any passion about anything growing up the way that some people from, their childhood knew they wanted to be a doctor or whatnot. That wasn't me. And so it just made logical sense to study business. You're always going to need business in the world. And I don't like numbers, so I guess I'll do marketing. This was my thought process. And I think other people do things like that, right?
Yeah.
It just makes logical sense. And that was really what guided me for, that first part of my life. And then I got everything that I worked for. I got the internship, and that led to the job. And then I was in the job, and, people are telling me like, oh, you're doing a great job, and let's move you up that ladder. And that was everything that I wanted, or thought that I wanted. And it just felt so empty and not fulfilling. And just the corporate environment is not who I am. Not saying, it's right for some people. But once I got in it, I realized it wasn't right for me. And I realized that I didn't know what was right for me. I didn't know, I was kind of just going along with what made sense all this time. And that doesn't necessarily make you happy. And so that's when I started meditating. And at that point in my life, meditation was very difficult. Like a lot of people, I still have a lot of clients these days that tell me like, meditation, everybody keeps talking about how wonderful it is, but it's really hard. And it is for, because in this world that we live in, it's very left brain dominated. Yeah. And so when we're in our left brain is the figure it out, the push energy of go, and, so we're used to kind of constantly pushing and trying to make it happen and trying to analyze it and figure it out. And so then here's meditation. It's very right brain. It's being and receiving.
And what made you think, oh yeah, I should start meditating? Where did that come from?
I think so. I was always very interested in dreams, and I've always had a very vivid dream life, and would write those things down and journal. So I love dream journaling. And so just kind of, and maybe there was like a boyfriend back in that kind of had started to kind of open my mind or introduce some of these kind of alternative topics. And I do remember my boyfriend at that time had given me this book that was about dreams, but it was also kind of like is in a greater spiritual context. And so that door started to open. I was raised as an atheist, and I never believed in anything that I couldn't see or touch or feel, and it didn't. So that whole world had been shut down, and the business world isn't about any of that either. So that wasn't something That wasn't something that was kind of part of my reality up until that point. And then it was just this very big existential crisis of like, why am I here? What's the point? I thought this was why I was here, you know, to work my way up that ladder. And now here I'm that in that world, and that's not fulfilling. And so just those big questions of like, what's the point of being alive? Just
Mm,
to get a better title and have nicer stuff. And it just felt so empty. So I think that that just kind of, here's what I thought the reality was. And then that all kind of came tumbling down and crashing. Probably what, you know, like right now, the time that we're living in, that could be the case for a lot of people too, right? Where you thought the world was one thing and it seemed safe and secure. And then that seems to not be the case. And so it kind of leads people to do a lot of questioning.
yeah,
And so,
yeah. And I love how, like, naturally, it's this, you were saying like left brain, right brain. There's also the concept in Chinese medicine of yin and yang. It's like these balancing forces need to be balanced out, or you just get unhappier and unhappier. And like, as you were just going through that, like super productive, I'm doing great in my job, and I'm working up that ladder, like you said, but this other half of you was just completely missing. It seems like just naturally, it's like, yep, this is what has to happen. I have to start meditating and, giving this other part of me some nourishment, or else I'm just going to feel terrible. So it's great that you kind of naturally have that instinct to get your ship balanced, so to speak.
yeah, and now that you're mentioning it, that kind of really is a lot of the work that I do with clients. I do see things from that yin yang perspective a lot. That our culture, our world has been very much in this productive yang energy that really values kind of the mental, intellectual, which of course, like both of these sides of the whole coin, they're both valuable. But yeah, when you get pulled off balance and you get pushed all this way, then there has to be some moving the other way to create that balance and that integration. So that does end up being a lot of like the underlying cause. People come to me, we'll talk about this more I guess in a bit, but people come with all these different presenting issues, but underneath it are these basic patterns of imbalance between like yin and yang, between heart and mind. These are all just saying the same thing in different ways, between left brain and right brain, between masculine and feminine. Those are all the same thing, just worded or looked at from a different perspective. So meditation was very, very difficult at first. I tried a bunch of different ways, and I would recommend to people, there's a lot of different meditation techniques. So if one way doesn't work for you, then try a different way until something clicks. And it tends to be that once one way clicks and you practice it for a while, then you're able to do some of the other ways too. But first you just have to find what can help kind of calm and settle you and quiet your mind. And for me, that was guided meditation. I found that when somebody else, like listening to an audio and somebody else is talking, my mind would like shut up out of respect to the voice.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay.
Versus just trying to like silence myself inwardly and sit there was very, very frustrating. And so one day, I don't know how long it took. It took a while. I would say it took over a month of practice before I felt like I was getting any kind of benefit or result. But then once it clicked, then that's all I wanted to do. I would meditate for like 3 or 4 hours after the end of my workday.
Wow.
And now, now I can look back and I can see that there was some escapism going on. I was like,
Yeah.
I just want to be in this beautiful, pretty world out here, not in this difficult, challenging, chaotic world here. So I don't meditate at those, lengths of time anymore, but that's what I need. Again, if the balance was all the way this way, that's kind of what I needed to start to pull me more to the center. And so what would happen, because I was meditating for such long periods of time, I often joke that like anybody, if you meditate for 3 or 4 hours a day, you probably will have a spiritual awakening. So that's what happened to me.
What you have to do, yeah.
Yeah, that's all. Just carve out 3 or 4 hours. Of course, so I was much younger. There's a lot less going on. But I started to feel energy. I started to feel energy in my body, and didn't know what that was all about. And then I started to just travel out of my body. I remember the first time where I just was meditating, and then suddenly like I was floating above my body and I could see
Yeah.
my body, and I was like, wow, so surprised. And then my roommate at the time knocked on the door, and then I slammed back into my body. I was so disappointed. I was like,
Yeah.
what was that?
Yeah. I've done
So
that on the acupuncture table. It's a wild feeling, really. It's pretty
yeah.
cool though.
It is pretty cool because, to realize that you're not, that your awareness, that your existence doesn't just come from your body, is very powerful. It's because, we're so focused, and we want to have a healthy relationship. Again, it's all about balance. We want to have a healthy relationship with our body, but then we're so afraid if anything happens to our body that we will no longer exist. And it's just a wonderful reassurance to realize that you're more than just your body. Your body is
Right.
one piece. Hmm.
Yeah, and it's I hear it a lot when meditation teachers are talking about meditation and how beneficial it is for mental health issues like anxiety and depression, or just that monkey mind where you can't kind of control your thoughts. Just the understanding that you are not your thoughts, you're experiencing your thoughts, but they kind of come and go, and you can let them pass you like a cloud overhead. And just having that understanding that you are not stuck, you are not depressed. Maybe you're feeling sensations of depression, or you're feeling sensations of sadness, but 100% of you is not a depressed being or an anxious being. And meditation is really good at teaching the whole nervous system, not just the conscious mind. And I know you deal a lot in the subconscious, so we'll get to that. But the whole being, that there are other feelings that come and go, and you're not just this one. You're not 100% anxious. And even just using that definition of like, I am depressed, that settles 100% of you as a depressed being, as opposed to just I'm having feelings of depression that come and go like clouds. So I think there's something there that is that you are experiencing more like physically, and in your whole body, of like coming out of yourself and almost seeing your whole experience before you. It's really cool.
Yeah. Um, and if you haven't experienced that, like it's okay too.
Yeah.
Of course, I don't, the funny thing was like back then when I was meditating for so long, it would just happen without me trying. And then, then of course I couldn't sustain meditating 3 or 4 hours every day, right? Life takes over and you can't always do that. And so, but I really wanted to have those experiences again. And there's all these books, that will talk about how to have out of body experiences. There's techniques. It's really hard for me, like, because it's that interesting balance, of wanting to have an intention but not holding any pressure or expectation around it, which
Mhm.
is a good lesson overall for everywhere in our life, for all these different
Right.
aspects. But like when you're like trying to have an out of body experience, then you tend to hold a little bit of tension, but in order to have it you have to release all of that and just not expect it, so it was this weird thing where like when I try to have it I can't make it happen.
Yeah.
So I know people that are frustrated with that, and it's similar with hypnosis, but so yeah, so a lot of that comes to kind of the right mindset coming into it and kind of shifting, because again in this like young society that we live in, we get so focused on outcome and end results instead of learning how to just kind of be in our process. And so so that's kind of a lot of the work that I'm doing with people, whether it's through energy healing or hypnosis, is kind of we're learning how to enjoy the process and be in the beingness, and to understand how our mindset affects so much. It's very holistic. Our mind, our body, our emotions, our spirit, they're all connected. And to understand that if you work on one end, it'll help the others, whichever you can enter whatever point makes sense for you. Whether you're just focusing more on the body to relax your mind, you can do that, or you can focus on your relaxing your mind to help your body, and you can, so these things all work together. So for me, so I started to feel that energy, and I didn't know what it was. And somebody had mentioned like, oh, you should go see this energy guy. And so I did. I had a session. He was a Reiki master, and this is when I lived in Hawaii. That's where I'm originally from. And I joke, like he's very much what I stereotypically would have imagined as this Reiki master, this kind of like older, kind, but very quiet Japanese man, and Reiki is a healing modality from Japan. And he just had this like empty Zen room with just a mat on the floor, and he'd kneel next to me, and I'd lay on the mat, and he didn't say very much. But I just felt so amazing. I was just like, wow, I want that all the time. And he said, oh, you can have that if you want to learn Reiki. And so that's how I started on the Reiki path. Yeah. I just was like, I want this feeling all the time, and took the first Reiki class. And if there's one thing that I would say, I'm so enthusiastic about Reiki, even after all these years. I'm very passionate about Reiki, just because it's such a simple tool that I would really, I think everybody in the world needs to be attuned to Reiki, because because a lot of times people don't even realize like, oh, you can just take Reiki 1 class just so that you're directly connected to the energy, and you can use Reiki just for yourself. So you don't have to want to be a healer. And I love receiving acupuncture, but I would never want to study it. I've looked at like all the books, like, I mean, I haven't looked at all the books, but I've looked at like I've seen example, like those books that you guys have to study.
Yeah,
like, the 4 years of training and these like, medical books. I'm just like, oh gosh, like, all of that, it's a lot. And I respect that. But what I love about Reiki is that Reiki does everything and I do nothing. I'm just, as the Reiki practitioner, I'm just a pure conduit for it. I'm not directing the energy. I'm not reading somebody's energy. I'm not manipulating their energy. I'm just like, I use water as the metaphor for Reiki. So I'm the tube. I'm the funnel and then, the recipient is the soil. And if you pour water on soil, it just absorbs wherever it needs to go. And that's what's happening in a Reiki session. And because everything is energy, that's your physical body, your mental body, your emotional body, or even your spiritual body. If you're open to that, it can help kind of clear or balance, or a lot of people feel just very depleted, right? So they feel like their cup got filled up, like, oh, wow, I feel like totally recharged and restored. So the beautiful things, I just feel that Reiki is, going back to where we were talking before, Reiki is very much this yin energy, because it's not about figuring it out or, making it do something. On the other hand, like, because versus what you do, where you could pinpoint like, oh, you have this issue and this issue. Well, let's put the needle here and here. And so you can kind of, in a more precise way, work with particular issues. Whereas with Reiki, I tell people like, they're like, oh, can Reiki heal my back pain? Or, can Reiki, whatever, cure this or that? And I'm like, well, it could, but I can't make any promises. Like, sometimes people come in for a physical issue, but they get a really big mental, emotional benefit. Or sometimes, people come in for a mental thing, but find a really great physical benefit. I know that, Reiki restores and balances and replenishes and heals. I just can't tell someone really like ahead of time what way they're going to experience it. But I know, people always, I should say always leave, but like people mostly really get a lot of benefit and feel really great from it.
Yeah. And well, I mean, like you said, we're such a relatively yin deficient society, right? Like we're very focused on productivity and what's the next thing, and can I get one more rep, and what, can I get that promotion, which is on one hand, it's wonderful. It's made us pioneers in a lot of aspects of kind of where we are in the world. But it also leaves a lot of people feeling depleted, and it's the reason why depression is such a big issue, and anxiety is such a big issue, and sleep issues. So I think that's probably why Reiki, like you said, it's such a yin activity in itself. And I also love what you said about how just the body it's so intelligent at just taking what it needs, and whatever system is depleted or most depleted at that time, it knows exactly what to do. It's like, all right, we need the most resources right here. We're going to use what is being given right now to help bring into balance this specific system because it needs it the most. And we're just using the body's wisdom, like you said. It's like I'm the messenger basically. And I feel that a lot of the time with acupuncture too. You're absolutely right. Sometimes it's like, oh, this specific muscle is messed up, we're going to put acupuncture needles here, we're going to hit a trigger point here, and we'll get that specific muscle firing again, and you'll be good to go. But other times it's more like these specific systems are out of balance. We're going to put needles in to help these specific systems, but then the body's going to take over. Like, the body is doing what it's going to do. Yes, we're putting the needles in to help direct that, but it really is marvelous to watch the body just take over and do what it's going to do.
Yeah. So that's how I got into Reiki. And but then I also do hypnosis. And so when I was first kind of like having this big spiritual awakening, I suddenly I discovered that passion that was missing, right? Like I said, I was doing everything by logic, but it was feeling empty. And I get so many people that have been also living their life that way again, because if in this culture, we really value like the intellect, but we don't always value the heart equally. And so people are just trying to make smart moves, but not like fulfilling moves. And that, that catches up with you after a while, right? I have lots of clients that have been like, very successful and done very well in life, but and have been so busy going that they didn't pay attention to the fact that they weren't happy, or they weren't, cognizant of that even. And then and then like particularly like this year, something like the pandemic happens where you're forced to slow down, and then you start to question like, oh, why was I doing all of that stuff? Like that stuff would make me happy. So anyway, suddenly I had this big thirst, this big passion that I'd never felt before. Like all I wanted to do was like study all of this, like, psycho spiritual stuff, like everything about like psychology and the way that we think, and the way our mind works, and how our emotions fit into that, and also spirituality. And so, one of the books that I'd read was this book called Journey of Souls by Michael Newton. And he was a hypnotherapist that guided people into spirit realm. And I thought, that guy has such a cool job. Wow. I can just imagine spending all day like guiding people into spirit realm and just getting to, hear their experiences. Like, how could that be a job, right? So it didn't even cross my mind at that time, like, oh, I could do that work, or I'd like to do that work. It just didn't, it's just like so outside of like the realm that I was in. And so really like initially, like I dove into all of these kinds of the inner work, things that I realized that I had ignored within myself, which is, honoring and valuing the emotions. Like, and this is kind of work that I oftentimes end up doing with clients that come for hypnosis. Like somebody might come in for stop smoking, but we end up doing inner child healing, because the part of them that smokes, the part of us that drives our behavior is often our emotional self. So if we were going to just do everything logically, right? Like nobody would ever smoke a cigarette. There's like, I don't think there's anybody on the planet that doesn't know that cigarettes are bad for you, right? Or same thing with like eating unhealthy. Like that's pretty common knowledge now, but why do people do those things? You could say with cigarettes, it's like, oh, it's a physical addiction. But I mean, if it were just a physical nicotine addiction, then you could just do the patch and you can wean your body off of that. But there's an emotional reason that causes somebody to reach for that cigarette or to the candy bar or whatever. And so our emotions are super powerful and really drive our behavior. And in our culture, we haven't honored or valued or understood emotions as an important part of our makeup. So a lot of people are just pushing them down, and then emotions become a pressure cooker, and then blah, they show up in some kind of compelling, desire for something that's not good for you, right? And so so hypnosis is really a lot about, oftentimes it's connecting with the emotional part of ourself. um, the subconscious is like beliefs and emotions. Those are the things that are hidden. They're not really hidden, but we're not wanting to look at them, so they're hidden from us because we're pushing them down, and we're just focusing on, like, I don't get it. I want to be healthier, and that's their logical, reasonable mind, but that's not who's running the show half the time. And so so anyway, some years later, so I kind of did all of this, was going through my own journey of my own inner child healing, my own balancing and honoring my masculine and feminine, my own shadow work, which is just dealing with the hidden aspects of your consciousness, and bringing them to light. And it's really, I think, like all the different kinds of work that I do, which might seem kind of chaotic or scattered, that I do these different things, but they're really all about this integration between these different aspects of ourself, mind and emotions, and subpersonality parts, and body and spirit. They're really all connected, and we can't, we can temporarily separate them to look at certain parts, but they all work together as a whole. And so I think that's how people end up coming to work with a practitioner like yourself or myself, is that they, went these old traditional routes that compartmentalized and separated everything, and it wasn't, answering everything or fitting the bigger picture, and pieces weren't all falling into place if you ignored one aspect of yourself and only looked at this other and didn't see how they're all connected. So so anyway, so I kind of went through this whole journey of my own inner healing, and at some point I ended up managing a yoga center. And one of the students came in and said, like, oh, I'm reading this really great book, Journey of Souls. And I was like, yeah, that was a good book. I should read that again. And that time when I reread the book, just all the bells went off in my head of, like, I'm supposed to be doing this work. This is what and so that really just kind of pushed me to, so the guy that wrote the book, his name was Michael Newton, and he had created a hypnotherapy institute where you could get trained to do this practice. And so I reached out to them, and I found out I needed to be, so this is when I lived in California, I could call myself a certified clinical hypnotherapist. Okay. That was my training. But state by state, they have their own little. So in Texas, I can't call myself a hypnotherapist. I have to call myself a hypnotist. But anyway, when I got trained, I was a hypnotherapist. I got training in California. So I was like, oh, okay, I need to become a certified clinical hypnotherapist. I need to practice for 2 years before I can get this training for this particular type of spiritual regression. And that's what got me into studying with hypnosis. And really, once I started to get that training, I just loved it. I just loved, how holistic it is, and working. I see things, I tend to look at things from the perspective of connectedness. And I love, it's a little, I don't know, it's kind of like reading like a detective story, and you get these different clues, and then at the end it all kind of comes together. And I love that, seeing how all the pieces fit together. And so yeah, so people tend to come to me. It could be something physical, like it could be something where they either feel stuck, or it could be something that they want to heal or just to understand. So, like typical things that you think of as like with hypnosis is like losing weight and stop smoking, but also just all of those kinds of emotional things that you said. People, although I can't say that I treat these things, like I'll just say people come to me who are depressed, people come to me who are anxious, people come to me who want more joy and don't understand what's in the way of that.
And what I understand from hypnosis is that, I mean, you're and you kind of mentioned it, you're helping people identify emotions and beliefs in their subconscious that have been pushed down, down, down. What are the reasons why for why those are being pushed down? I mean, I can understand trauma for sure. Like that's a really common one that if you've seen any sort of like if you've ever seen Law and Order SVU, we see that all the time, trauma being squashed down. But are there other reasons that we're it seems like pretty consistently doing that as a society, as a culture?
I mean, as a well, if we're talking the big, cultural, um, yeah, there has been, it's been a predominantly young culture, as you said. So like, so these emotions, they're yin, right? And so like, oh, that's not productive. We don't have time for those emotions. What
Right.
are those emotions gonna get me, right? We're like looking at like that we want this like outcome, this end result. Those are useless. Like a lot of people don't see the value in emotions at all. And so, we're not in a culture that really honors emotions. But emotions are to me, they're the color, they're the richness, they're the spice of life, right? Without that's what happens is that people kind of like set that aside and then just focus on achieving and focus on logic. But there gets to be some point where life just feels kind of robotic, and people feel kind of numb. And like I said, they thought that like they achieve, and then they get all these things. And so like I was lucky to like, at the very bottom of the totem pole of the corporate ladder to realize that quickly, because other people will spend their life like working up that totem pole and only to get to this place where it's much harder. They're very entrenched now. They have like all these bills and this really lavish lifestyle and these people to support and things like that, and to like step away from that is a lot harder than at the very beginning of your journey to step away from. But yeah, so people, if you're just taking one side and not doing the whole balance of both, there's just this kind of like numbness and emptiness that happens if you don't engage. Like, so I mean, yeah, so all of this like yin stuff is like play. Like people think like I'm an adult, like there's no time for play, that's a
Right.
useless activity. But no, play is what recharges our batteries. This is why people get so tapped out. And so sometimes, or oftentimes, it takes these health things because people have been pushing and not allowing themselves to rest, enjoy, relax, play. And so and then their body breaks down because it's imbalanced. So I do think it's like a deep cultural thing that, again, like I think 2020 is as difficult, and all of these bad things that we could say could attribute to 2020. There's this other piece that's beautiful about people starting to people having been forced to slow down and spend more time with their family or in nature, or things like this that bring some of that reset, some of that balance, and realizing like, oh, I don't have to keep going through an hour of traffic and then being in this unhealthy environment under the fluorescent lights and spending
Mhm.
this extra time. Oh, I can do that work at home, and I can actually be productive in less time and have more time to relax and enjoy, and so forth. So there's that. There's the whole cultural thing. um, when we're kids, we, for most of us, that we're fortunate to maybe be raised in a safe, healthy environment. Um, we're so free when we're kids, and you fall down and you cry, and then 5 seconds later you pop back up and you laugh, and your emotions are just flowing. And so and as kids, we're open to all these different ideas, and we're not judging them until we're told boys don't cry, girls shouldn't get angry, and oh, good kids are like this, bad kids are like this. And then all of this like world that was like really open starts to get narrower, and so then those emotions start to get stuffed, and then they're blocks in our energetic system, right? So like when we're kids, we have all this energy. Well, all of our energy is flowing because we're not like pushing things down and hiding them and stuffing them from ourselves. And then that kind of programming starts when we're really young, and then it just becomes second nature. And then people get really out of touch with their body, with their emotions. And so they don't know something's wrong. I'm not very happy, but I don't know why. It's
Mhm.
because I don't know why, because I've spent my life not getting in touch with those things.
Right.
And emotions, whereas the mind, it feels very safe because 1 plus 1 equals 2. And so I feel very safe in these numbers, right? And they make sense. Whereas emotions can, feel very scary and unpredictable and overwhelming. And so people just want to just totally shut that door, versus we have to find like a healthy balance. It's not
Mm,
about like just becoming an emotional wreck and just drowning in my sorrows all the time, nor is it about like just shutting that door and becoming a robot. And
yeah.
so there's this a healthy balance place that I think as a culture we're trying to find, letting it be okay for men to cry, and and for women to express their anger and so forth. So
Yeah, I mean that's so interesting because I mean it's almost like the body is going to fight for that balance no matter what. So if you're like, all I care about is productivity and kind of there's no room for play, like you said, like the body is going to fight for that by having a sugar addiction or it's like this is my version of play almost. But there are very healthy ways to find that balance that are going to benefit you long term, as well as just short term, your day to day happiness. Or you can kind of allow these other ways to do it to kind of seep in, because the body's going to fight to try to find that balance, sometimes in good ways and sometimes in not so good ways.
yeah, and that's the thing. So with hypnosis, a lot of times the way that I first work with somebody who comes in presenting an issue, like let's say, like you said, like sugar addiction or something. So in hypnosis, which is really just like a similar to like a guided meditation state. So it can happen in alpha brainwave state, or it can happen in theta brainwave state. And people always just think of theta brainwave state, which is that deep meditative state, and they're like, "Oh, that's hypnosis." But hypnosis is also just as effective in alpha, which is a light daydreamy state that everybody accesses on a daily basis. So you don't
Mm,
have to think of it as this like woo-woo state that only special people can reach who have meditated for 4 hours a day,
right.
like, no, really, like you go in and out of, our alert waking brainwave state is beta, and we go between beta and alpha, the light daydreamy state, throughout the day. Every day you go through to alpha, and so absolutely, most people who choose who want to experience hypnosis, most people can. Some people on their first try, might be more difficult. People who I'd say like 90% of my clients can go into hypnosis on the first try. But people that have a really difficult time are the super left brain achiever perfectionist types, people that have a hard time relaxing, and people who have a hard time trusting and allowing themselves to be guided and to let go. But even those people, like if somebody feels like they're in that category, then I just suggest maybe like going on YouTube and listening to some guided meditation and kind of practicing with it a little bit first before coming in. But so like the person with the sugar addiction, so I guide them into this relaxed inner focused kind of meditative state. And then we would connect with the part of you that feels it needs sugar. So the thing is that what happens is we get really ashamed, like eating all this sugar or smoking cigarettes. And then we're like, oh, that's this bad part of me. Can you just hypnotize it away? And
Yeah, yeah.
I'm like, no, that's, there's no bad part of you. There's parts of you that have learned behaviors that you might not like, but underneath the behavior that's not good, it's a part of you that's trying to meet its needs. And the only way, or the best way that it knows how, it's developed at a certain age. Maybe the sugar addiction developed when you were 6 or 7, and that part of you didn't have the life experience and the tools and resources that you have now. And so, and by being ashamed of that part, then you've kept it, pushed down, and they've kept it stuck. So we want to connect with that part, and then I will dialogue with that part and see what's underneath that, and then see how a lot of times things like, for instance, like sugar addiction, it is like it's an food. A lot of the food issues have to do with nurturing issues. People who were never shown how to nurture themselves, and don't allow themselves to be nurtured, will seek out, they get this kind of emotional nurturing through food. And so once we realize like, oh, emotional nurturing is a good thing, that's not a bad thing, and then we come up with new ways to get that need met, and then we see if that part of them will agree. If this person incorporates these new ways to meet that need, would it be willing to give up sugar, or lessen sugar? And so that tends to be a very effective way, versus just like that person coming in and me giving a bunch of suggestions. Sugar tastes like garbage. Sugar, like that could work. I don't like that negative approach. That could work, but not really, because it's like a Band-Aid. Oh, so they stop eating sugar. Now they just drink more alcohol. Like that need is still not being met. And oftentimes it'll just hop around into another negative type of addiction versus like going deeper underneath that and not shaming and loving, accepting this part of you and trying to help this part in a more beneficial way.
I love that. I mean, that goes back to you being a detective. You're kind of uncovering what is the root of this this addiction, so that we can uncover that and treat that rather than just slap a Band-Aid on it and move on to the next one.
Yeah, and it's funny, until this conversation, I've never really realized that yeah, there's like a part of me that likes like being this detective. And now that you mentioned, I'm like, yeah, there's like, it's very satisfying when like, and then the client will say something and then all the pieces kind of fall into place. It's really beautiful. And just the overall, like, constantly being reminded how everything is connected, and that's a beautiful thing. I know, like, in our culture, there's a beautiful thing about our independence and our self-reliance, and there's something beautiful about that too. But there's also a beautiful thing about how everything is connected too.
Yeah.
And sometimes, people will come in, and on the intake form, I have like, where they can check off, like, I'm experiencing challenges in, and some people will check off like almost everything. And, it'll look really like overwhelming, when I mention like, oh, okay, here's what you mentioned as your challenges, blah, 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 blah. And they're like, oh my God, there's something really wrong with me. But then it's like, no, actually those things, they're probably really interconnected. And so once we go down, those are like the surface kind of symptom things, but underneath is like these deep root things like we're talking about, which is often this yin yang thing that we're talking about, this balance, honoring all these different aspects of ourselves, and not just valuing this piece and then ignoring or devaluing this piece. It's like learning how to bring everything into balance.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love it. Love it so much. I feel like I could talk to you for hours, but I know I said we try to keep this about 45 minutes. And I think we're just over that. So I really do appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today. I think, you're doing some amazing work. I'm glad that you're doing the work that you're doing, because I'm sure a lot of people are benefiting from it. How could people get in touch with you if they want to learn more about you, utilize your services? How can they find out more about that?
Yeah, the best way is probably to go to my website, which is awakeningtransformation.com. And that's awakening transformation singular, because sometimes people want to put an S at the end, .com. And you can read about my different services, and you can even book online. You can also just on there, it says, and I can give this over the recording too. You can also call and do a free phone consultation, because a lot of times people will look and be like, oh, I don't know, should I be doing hypnosis? Should I be doing energy healing? And I'm like, well, if you talk, we can talk kind of about what you want to get out of the session. And then through that, we can kind of figure out what's a good first place to start. So they can also call 512-820-7922, and that's my business number, and schedule just a 15-minute free phone consultation.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, well, those are great options. I highly encourage folks to do it, because I mean, the benefits are substantial. Particularly if you were listening to this and being like, "Yep, that's me." I think there's a lot of opportunity where Tianna can give you a lot of help. So thank you again for joining us, and I'll look forward to speaking with you soon.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Sure thing. All right, take care.